Now, one last little wrinkle to this idea of a transport zone is understanding how a transport zone defines replication. Replication of what? Well, those amazing tables, the VTEP, the MAC, and the ARP tables that are shared and must be commonly understood by all the hosts in the clusters participating in the same logical switch. There are 3 available methods of replication. We could multicast, we can unicast, or we have a hybrid approach available to us as well. So what does that mean? Well, a multicast, for example, if ESXi1 is needing to act on behalf of a VMA that is trying to reach VMC and needs to learn where VMC's IP address and MAC address are going to be located so that it can connect to the appropriate VTEP, it will send out a multicast request that will be heard by ESXi2 and 3 and 4. They're all going to have a common multicast address that they use in addition to their own personal IP address, and ESXi2 with the information needed can then respond back to ESXi1, who can then populate the appropriate ARP or MAC table or VTEP table, whatever's necessary there. This IP address is mapped to this MAC address, and this MAC address is mapped to this VTEP. So all that information is in place. Now it can forward the message. So that's the multicast approach. But in order for multicast to work, we need to support IGMP and PIM. A couple of multicast routing protocols need to be in place in order to forward the information to those participating members of that multicast group. Now, our second method, instead of multicast, is unicast. So we're just going to unicast to each ESXi host. How do I know which host to unicast to? Or do I unicast to all of them? Nope, neither of those. What we're going to do is unicast to the controller. Whenever there's a need to do a lookup of one of these tables in order to enhance the localized information, we access that information through the controller cluster. So this means that there's actually a lot of communication to keep those cluster nodes up to date. And remember, a VNI is supported by a particular cluster node. So for example, 5000 might be on cluster node 1, 5001 might be hosted by cluster node 2. Those are just individual VMs. But the search for that information is performed against the central cluster. It's like a central registration desk at a hotel. I don't have to go knock on every door in order to try and track down a particular person staying at a hotel. I just go to the front desk. That's where it's centrally registered, and I get the information I need. So that's the unicast approach. So another alternative was added, which is the hybrid. A hybrid of what? A hybrid of, you guessed it, unicasting and multicasting. Specifically, it is going to multicast first in order to grab local information, but then if the multicast does not reveal the information needed, then we can go to the central registration desk of the NSX controller cluster to get the information necessary to populate the VTEP, MAC, or ARP tables as needed. VMware officially says multicasting should be only used in support of a legacy environment, but a lot of people really still like multicasting because it reduces the amount of traffic. Unicasting actually ends up with a lot of traffic going back and forth between all of the hosts and the NSX controller cluster to keep that central registration desk populated. So there is a cost associated with the simplicity of it, but there's no central configuration on routers that has to be done like with a multicast. The hybrid approach does give us some advantages in not having to do a lot of work on our physical routers to support inter-VLAN multicasting, but there's still a fair amount of traffic to keep the controller cluster up to date, even if we're not using it for all of our lookups. So once again, there's no one best answer for this. So when we roll out a transport zone, we get to pick a particular methodology that will be shared by all of the members of that transport zone. They are agreeing on the rules of the game that they're going to play. And they have to do that because if you don't have the VTEP, MAC, and ARP tables, you don't have the information necessary to create a logical switch. So my friend, by going through this nugget together, you've learned the 3 types of transport zone replication: multicast, unicast, and hybrid, which puts you at an advantage when you're implementing your transport zones to choose a method that is going to work best with your environment. Are you focusing on using the NSX controller, multicasting, or hybrid between the two? I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.